Hi everyone, welcome back to Next Steps Ukulele with me, Matt Stead. In today's video we're going to continue our exploration of Clawhammer Ukulele. Only instead of playing melodies with Clawhammer, we're going to look at a way as playing Clawhammer Ukulele but as the rhythm instrument. Let's take a look. So just quickly before we get into the mechanics of it, what do I mean by playing as a rhythm instrument rather than melody? Well, I just mean rather than playing a solo like we did last week with Wildwood Flower, we're actually going to play our ukulele as if we're backing up something. So it could be a singer or it could be another soloist. So we're going to have a look at our Fly Away. Some bright morning when this day is over, notice how I'm playing the ukulele to back up my singing. I'm using it as a rhythm instrument, and that's what I want to tackle today. How to kind of, in effect, replace chords or a strum using this clawhammer technique. Now, if you haven't watched the last video on the basic clawhammer technique, I think it's really important to go back and watch the start of that video, even if you just watch the first 5 minutes where I go into the basics of how to play clawhammer with our right or left hand if you're left-handed. But just as a quick reminder, what we want to do is we want to take this hand, the strumming hand, and we want to fold our last 3 fingers inwards, but not tight. We don't want a tight fist. What we want is a light, almost like a claw shape that we end up with. That's partly where the name Clawhammer comes from, I suppose. We want to be able to see daylight in between these fingers and the palm. This index finger is protruding slightly, and that's really important because we're going to attack the strings of the ukulele coming inwards using the nail side of that index finger. So just sticking it out allows it to act almost like a pick or a plectrum on a guitar. Just a very, very quick reminder now of the 3 parts of the bum ditty. That's the basis of clawhammer. Uke at a 45-degree angle, remember? Now, we're going to attack the A string, the one that we're playing the C note on, with the index finger coming down, and that's the first part of our bum ditty. That's the bum, if you excuse the pun. Okay, coming down. Notice I'm coming in towards the ukulele. I'm hitting the A string with the nail side of this index finger. And notice afterwards, my thumb is resting roughly on the G string, the one nearest our nose. Okay, so that's our bum. Our dit, which follows, is a very light brush stroke with the nail side of that index finger coming down. And the crucial thing at this point is that thumb is resting on the G string. Okay, so we've got our bum, dits, bum, dits. Keep that dit nice and light, bum, dits. Now, the crucial thing about having that thumb resting on the G string is that the T of the bum ditty, what we do is we take our thumb away, and that instantaneously, without having to do anything extra, picks the G string. Now remember, we don't want to pick down with our thumb like this because it pulls us out of position. We don't want our arm to come down. We want our arm to come outwards. And the reason for that is that we have a 3-part strum, if you like, or finger style. We're coming in, down, out. And of course, by coming out allows us to go in again, down, out. Bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty, in, down, out, in, down, out, in, down, out, in. Fantastic. Just kind of remind yourself of that strum, take a little time with it, and then let's have a look at how we can place this in the context of a song. In a little while, we'll look at adding this ornamentation where we have these lovely hammer-ons and pull-offs. But just for now, let's have a look at a really basic, almost like a strum pattern that we can do on this clawhammer to play a tune. And all I'm going to do is that technique exactly as I just showed you. I'm going to hold down a C chord, and I'm going to come in and hit that A string, brush down and out. And I'm just going to keep that going round and round. Now, a normal 4/4 common time, I would count that as 1 ander. So if you imagine it's one full beat, including the offbeat. So we could have 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... Fantastic. Try changing to an F chord, just a normal F chord, and doing exactly the same thing. We're still attacking that A string and coming down with our ditty. Bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty. And then perhaps we'll go back to a C. Bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty, bum, ditty. Great. So, ta-da! We're going to make it more fancy, but already you have a rhythmic accompaniment you could do to accompany a song. So for instance, if I play the start of I'll Fly Away, and don't worry, I'm going to talk about this song in a moment and the chords, it could sound something like this. Bum ditty bum ditty bum ditty. Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... See? All you need to do is practice building up that speed slowly, starting slowly. Bum, ditty, bum, ditty. Building up your confidence and then counting along with the song. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... Let's take a quick look at I'll Fly Away. This is a really, really lovely old-time classic. Now, I've simplified it by creating it as a 4/4 common time song, which makes it a lot easier to count along with the measures. And I've also kept it to its most basic 3 chords. That's the 1, 4, 5 chords in the key of C. That just simply means we're in the key of C. We're playing the first chord C, not D, not E, the 4th chord F, and the 5th chord G. C, F and G. And the important thing when we're strumming, we will turn this into Clawhammer in a minute, but just to get an idea, let's give it a strum. The important thing when you're strumming old time music, and this is where a lot of people fall down on this, is old time music precedes swing. So often when we play ukulele and we're doing, I'm just going to do a walk, running, running, running strum. So down, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now, if you know me well and my teaching, you know I hate people getting kind of het up in strum patterns. So if you struggle with that, just strum up and down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. That's absolutely fine. Now, when we strum that way, we're tempted to swing it like this. Feel that swing, but what we want to do is take away the swing altogether, so every up and down strum are exactly the same feel. So now we have, can you hear that? Walk, running, 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 walk, running, 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 swung, slight behind the beat, on the money. Now, if you have a look, I've provided you with a sheet. You probably don't need this because it's such a simple song. Look, we have 2 measures of C, one of F and another of C. Now, in the second part, and this is the verse and the chorus, this piece of music just repeats the same 8 bars over and over. But the second part, notice we have 2 measures of C. Now here we have 3 beats of C, 1 of G, and then another measure of C. If I play it through slowly, see if you can get the hang of kind of counting along with that. So just as a strum, I'm just playing the C chord. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and F and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and second line and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So Practice that through. It can take a little bit of getting used to that quick G that suddenly appears on that fourth beat of that penultimate measure. Let's try up some words and then we'll look at adding the clawhammer accompaniment. Come in with me after 4. By the way, this one is way too low register for me to sing. I sound like Barry White or something. I say this about a few songs, don't I? A lot of ukulele stuff, if we put it in the key of C, it makes it a whole lot easier to show you things, which I've done here, but it's really hard for me to sing. Come in after 4, I'm going to do once through calling out the chords and once through with the words. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and C and 2 and 3 and 4 and C and 2 and 3 and 4 and F and 2 and 3 and 4 and C and 2 and 3 and 4 C and 2 and 3 and 4 and C and 2 and 3 and 4 and C and 2 and 3 and 4 and C and 2 and 3 and 4. Now that sneaky little G, that's a really common thing for the 5 chord to come in right at the end on the last beat of a measure. It's a common thing in old time music, so see if you can get used to it. Let's try it for the words. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. Let's go for another one. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. I'll fly away. So that's the general gist of the song. That just repeats over and over and over. One of the brilliant thing about old time music, just A and a B section again and again and again. And in fact, in this song, the A and the B sections are exactly the same. So let's go back to that bum ditty clawhammer strum. Remember, I'm just attacking the A string and then following it with a ditty. So on a C chord, bum ditty, bum ditty, bum ditty. As I said at the start, in common time or 4/4 time, each bum ditty we're going to play for a beat included in the offbeat that follows. So in terms of counting this along as an accompaniment, all we need to do is do that little pattern 4 times every measure. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... It's as simple as that. We have that lovely rhythmic accompaniment. On the second line, if anything, it helps us play that G at the right time more easily because we just do 2 measures of C. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. Then we do 3 lots of clawhammer followed by 1 of G. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. Okay, so just that penultimate measure again. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. Okay, so I change on the 4th beat of the measure to the G chord. My right hand doesn't do anything different, just keeps going the same way all the way through. So let's try that with a verse and a chorus, just to get that fingers used to that bum ditty rhythm, keeping it going again and again. And then afterwards we'll look at these lovely embellishments to make things more interesting. Here we go. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. Good. head. And again. I'll fly away, oh glory F. I'll fly away. Next line. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Let me know how you got on with that in the comments. That second line might take a bit of practice changing to that G on the fourth beat of the measure. But remember, I've said this before and I'll say it again, if you can play something slowly, you can play it quick with practice. So just slow that whole method down until you're really comfortable. Remember, coming in, down, out, in, down, out, in, down, out, and trying to keep that claw the whole time. You might notice a bit of movement from my thumb, but generally, okay, it's staying where it wants. It's not coming right down here. So one last step before we add all the ornamentation in, the hammer-ons and pull-offs, and that's to vary the strings that we pick. Now I'm going to be quite arbitrary about this, and I'm going to get us to pick the A string first, just like we have been all the way along, and I'm going to alternate that with the bum of our bum ditty. I'm then, after I've hit the A string and done a ditty, I'm going to hit the E string with my index finger and do a ditty. So I'm hitting A string, ditty, E string, ditty, A string, ditty, E string, ditty. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. Now it doesn't really matter the strings that you hit. It could be the C string, or it could go E string, A string. The one thing I do think is nice to keep it really consistent throughout the song, just so you get kind of a nice rhythmic feel for it and it doesn't confuse the ear. So what I'd like us to do now, and I'm going to try very slowly at first, keep it slow motion, is play through the tune just like we did a minute ago, but this time instead of just hitting the A string and adding the ditties, we're going to alternate that with hitting the E string and adding the ditties. So it will sound like this as an example. Just quickly before we do it, remember we're still having 4 bum ditties on every measure. So that's going to be 2 bum ditties on the A string and 2 bum ditties on the E string, but remember we're going to alternate. So it'll be 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a on every measure. And just look out for that G chord in the second line, okay? So remember it only comes in for 1 beat. So you're actually only going to hit the E string and a ditty on that chord. So if I was to play that line, I would have C for a measure, 2, 3, 4. I have another measure of that, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I would have the measure with the G in. Now we would have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm changing to G on the 4th beat. And when I do that, I'll hit the E string because that would be the string we're hitting. So just that measure would be A string on a C chord, E string, A string, E string on a G, and then we would go back to C for the final measure. Perhaps if you're not sure, just listen through the first time, get a feel for it, and then you can join in, rewind and join in again. So here we go. Here we go, after 4. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a C. 2, 3, 4. Another C. 1, 2, 3, 4. F. 1, 2, 3, 4. Back to C. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second line. C. 2, 3, 4. And again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, can take a little bit of practice to get that G chord, but you can do it. Just take your time, play as slowly as you like, and then you can speed it up to a higher tempo later on. So let's take a look at that ornamentation next, all this. What we mean by ornamentation is all the bells and whistles which kind of thicken up the sound and make it sound more interesting. And this is largely done using hammer-ons and pull-offs. Now, I've recorded an earlier video on how to do a hammer-on and a pull-off, but I'll go over the basics here and then I'll show you how to put it in time with this clawhammer strum so that we can piece the whole thing together. Let's take a look. So let's try a hammer-on first. For the hammer-on, what we're going to do is we're going to pick the open string, and let's try the A string again just to keep it simple, because that's where our finger will come down for a C chord. And what you're going to do is you're going to use your clawhammer technique to pick with the index finger, the nail side of that index finger coming down, and then immediately afterwards you're going to firmly, and that's the kind of name of the game, that's what makes this work, you're going to firmly press down with the third finger of your left hand or your fretting hand. Now, it's really important as you press down to have the courage of your conviction. Look what happens if I'm kind of very light with this finger. Do you see how the sound completely deadens? So imagine you're pushing nice and firmly into the fretboard. Try and get it towards either the dead in the middle of the fret or slightly to the right. If you go to the left, you're more likely to get a muting or a buzz. Okay, so we're going to pick that A string open and then hammer on with that left hand. Let's try that a few times. And. Okay, nice and simple, okay? Then all we need to do is follow that vaditty. So now we're going to do an open string and a hammer on and follow with our brush down and our thumb. Isn't that effective? Try it a couple of times on your own. Okay. Once you've got that, what you can do is you can rotate that round to create a pattern. Okay. Now remember when we were doing the original clawhammer pick, we were calling this one ander, two ander. The way I count this to make it easier for my counting is I count 1 E ander, 2 E ander, 3 E ander, 4 E ander, and that way you can fill up a measure. Now with our traditional C chord, if I'm playing this clawhammer strum technique using a chord, I've only got one finger really to create a hammer on. Some chords, such as a G major chord, you can hammer on with 3 strings because you can use this finger, you can use this finger, and you can use this finger. But with C, we only have one finger really with which to play these hammer-ons and pull-offs. So what I quite like to do in old-time music and bluegrass type stuff, and this is quite a common thing anyway when playing a C chord in bluegrass or old-time music, I'll play a C power chord. Often this is referred to as a C5 as well. What that means is we've got 2 fingers on the E and the A string. In a C chord, we have C, E, and G. And what we're doing by placing this finger here is we're taking out the E, okay, that one. It looks like a rude gesture if I'm not careful. And we're replacing it with another G. So the only 2 notes in this chord are C, G, C, G. All of those notes are either C or G. It gives it a very strong kind of feel to this chord, hence why it's called a power chord. Okay, only 2 notes, but it works brilliantly in old time and bluegrass music. Now by doing that, we've now got 2 options for hammer-ons because we can hammer on the finger on the A string, and we can also hammer on the finger on the E string now. Okay, now by turning that C chord into a power chord, we've now got the option to really thicken up this clawhammer accompaniment, because we can do hammer-ons wherever we want, making the music busier and more kind of bluegrass sounding. I'm not going to be too prescriptive about this, I want you to experiment, but what I'll quite often do is a hammer-on perhaps on the A string, followed by a hammer-on the E string. 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a. Let's slow that down so you can have a go. 1 E and a 2 E and a hammer on ditty, hammer on ditty. 1 E and a 2 E and a. Some bright morning when the day is over. See, you can gradually bring it up to tempo and we can fill up those measures. Really lovely. Of course, you don't have to do it in that order and you don't have to put them on every beat. Quite often I'll do a hammer on, followed by a clawhammer strum without one. So with, without, with, and followed by one without. You can do that on the E string as well. With, without. It's yours to experiment with and fill up these measures as long as you're counting those 1 E and a 2 E and a. Okay, you can't go wrong. Let's take a quick look at pull-offs as well. So pull-offs is the complete opposite of a hammer-on in effect, isn't it? So what we're going to do is we're going to start the pick with our finger down, and let's try this C position here on the A string. We're going to take it away and follow it with a ditty. Now when you do the pull-off, what I like to do is, as well as taking your finger off the string, and notice there's only one pick. I pick once, but the reason I have the sound of 2 notes is just like with a hammer-on. It's the sound of this finger moving off the string which produces the second note. And what I'll quite often do, rather than just lifting directly up off the string, I'll sometimes catch the string on the way down, so I can actually physically look a note there without doing anything with my right hand. I can then add a bit of force to it to really kind of strengthen it. And remember, we're going to follow it with a ditty. Pull off ditty, pull off ditty, pull off ditty. And I can do that on any string. I could do it on this power chord C that we were doing before, and do a pull off on the E string. Pull off ditty, pull off ditty, pull off ditty. And you can combine them up like that, just like you do with the hammer-ons. That provides you another option. So rather than just hammer-on, we can also do the reverse and add another texture to the piece. Again, this can take a long time for you to experiment, find what works with you. And there isn't one size fits all. Some ukulele and banjo players prefer to do more pull-offs, some hammer-ons, some equal amounts. It really depends on finding your style and working out what suits you. And we can apply this to any first position chords whatsoever. It's quite difficult with barred chords because when you do the pull off, you're taking your finger not necessarily off just one string, but 2 strings or more. So you have to be a bit careful with that. So I generally do open first position chords. So for instance, our F in our flyaway, I could do a hammer on or a pull off using this finger, right? So even though it's the string nearest my nose, the G string, I can still do it. I've got to move my claw shape upwards. And I just hammer on, as for instance. Follow it with a ditty. I could also pull off. Okay. And I can do exactly the same thing with this finger here on the E string. I could do a hammer on. Or I could do a pull off. And I can combine those up to create a lovely sound. I could also, with this F chord, the notes that make up an F chord are F, A and C. I could also add a finger down here using either my third finger or I prefer my little finger. I could add a finger here, and this is still a perfectly valid F chord. A lot of people think it's an F/C. It's not, it's just a perfectly valid F chord with 2 C's in it. And that allows me to do a hammer on down here on the A string, which sounds really lovely. I prefer to do my hammer-ons and pull-offs where possible on the E and A string because they're the two highest pitched strings. It kind of has that nice shrill sound and really cuts through more than doing a hammer off, particularly on the C string. That can be a little bit flappy and get a little bit lost. And finally, as mentioned before, on the G chord, because it's a 3-finger chord, we've got loads of options for hammer-ons and pull-offs. We could do them on the C string, the E string, and the A string. Loads and loads of options on that chord. Here's an example that we could do for an instrumental verse then. Don't worry about playing along, but it's just an example of how this could work. I keep it nice and light. I prefer hammer-ons to pull-offs because I find them easier to do and keep my rhythm. But again, experiment yourself. But just an example, something like this. Then go to the F. Now notice that last bit when I'm coming to that G chord, which is only for 1 beat, I don't tend to do any ornamentation on that because it's too busy there. To try and do that in 1 beat can be quite difficult and throw your rhythm. If you're singing this, and remember I can't sing this because it's way too low for me, but just to give you an example, I tend to keep things relatively light ornamentation wise whilst I'm singing because it can clash a bit. It can put me off my singing, but also it can sound a little bit too busy. So when I'm singing, I might just do some gentle clawhammer without any hammer-ons. So, some bright morning when the day is over, I'll fly away. Notice there we have a little gap in the song, don't we? Just a tiny little bit between the vocals where I could add a bit. I'll fly away. Then when I'm back to singing, to that home on God's celestial shore, keep it simple, I'll fly away. And add some ornamentation at the end where I'm not singing. Again, that can take a lot of practice to kind of decide what ornamentation you're going to use. Practice these through slowly. Try those hammer-ons first on their own. Do they work for you? Does it sound good? Try the pull-offs. Try combining the two. Try just starting on 1 string and then adding hammer-ons and pull-offs to 2 strings and build it up gradually. Have fun with it and experiment. Now, I'm going to do a playthrough to give you a chance to experiment with that and practice it. But I'm just going to strum the chords. Now, the reason I'm not too prescriptive about this, for instance, telling you to do a whole song where you're doing the first beat this, second beat this, third beat something else, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, it's too difficult for you to be thinking about which string you're hitting a hammer on at tempo at this point is too much for most people. And it's going to kind of make you mechanical, a bit like those strum patterns we talked about in the beginner's course. We want to keep this nice and loose. But also kind of old-timey bluegrass. It's like an oral traditional music and we want that spirit of improvisation and freedom to it. So we don't want to be too prescriptive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play along a version with very, very simple strumming like this. Some bright morning when this day is over. And the reason I'm doing that, as I just said, to allow you to improvise, but also so that my hammer-ons and pull-offs, if I was to do them, would clash with yours. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'd like you to practice that claw hammer technique. So as I'm strumming, you can add your... And remember, just count along with 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... Or, if you're adding the hammer-ons, 1E and a 2E and a 3 and a 4E and a. And just have an experiment. Remember, you can always use that playback button in the top right corner of your YouTube under the 3 dots, and you can play this back at 0.75 speed to make it a bit easier for you. But I'll keep things at a relatively slow tempo, about here. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. Let's give it a go. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a. Some bright morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Let's do another verse. When the shadows of this life have gone, I'll fly away. Like a bird from these prison walls I'll fly. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Fantastic. Let me know in the comments how you got on with that. If you find it too difficult to play along with myself, just practice those hammer-ons and pull-offs on their own, and then only when you feel confident enough, put them to chords, and then come back to the video if you feel ready to at a later point. So with loads of practice, as if by magic, you can now play Clawhammer Accompaniment. Now between this and the last video, we've now taught you how to play solo clawhammer, and clawhammer accompaniment, which are the two main ways of playing clawhammer. But that just be an introduction to clawhammer. There's so much to learn. If you'd like to go really in depth with this, there's a brilliant teacher. There's a few actually, but my favourite is Aaron Kime from The Quiet American. Also, he's a brilliant ukulele builder. He builds bean sprout ukuleles. And he's got a book on clawhammer ukulele, which is really good and well worth checking out. And his videos are excellent as well. So if you really want to delve deep into this clawhammer technique, check out Aaron Kime's work. He's absolutely fantastic.